are locked into the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast, frontline coverage of the Sacramento Kings. Now, here are your hosts, Jonathan Santiago and James Ham.
Welcome to the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast. I'm Jonathan Santiago. With me is James Ham, and joining us today, he's the head coach of Creighton. He coached, one of the top prospects in this year's NBA draft, who happens to be his son. We have Coach Greg McDermott on the line with us of Creighton University. Thanks for joining us today, Coach.
Happy to join you. You're not the first one to call me Doug, so don't feel bad.
That's okay. I appreciate that. I had Doug on my mind. I already had gone. I was thinking too far ahead as far as the interview was concerned. But we are going to be talking about Doug, your son, and he did spend 4 years in college, really crafting and bettering his game to the point where he is today. Now, a potential lottery pick in this year's draft. Was there a particular point in time during his career in college where you thought to yourself, you know what, he is capable of playing at the next level at the NBA?
Doug made a huge jump between his freshman and sophomore year in college, and he had a good year as a freshman. He was first team all conference in the Missouri Valley Conference, and I think averaged 14 points and 7 rebounds a game. But he really worked in the weight room and building his body during that summer. And when he came back into camp in October of that year, he's just a totally different player. His ability to finish through contact, his range improved as a result of the added strength. And I think it was probably his sophomore season where he started to show glimpses of maybe what was to come in the future.
Coach, we have a similar situation here in Sacramento where Ray McCallum and Ray McCallum Sr., they had this father-son dynamic in college. What was it like to have him, to look across the bench, and it's not just your star player, but it's also your son. You're watching him mature. You're watching him become a leader. You're watching him become one of the best scorers in college history. What was that like for you as a father?
Well, it was absolutely incredible, as you can imagine, and it's something that I wish every parent had the opportunity to experience. And obviously there were some times, I think, early in Doug's career where it was a little bit of a slippery slope for both of us because I'd never coached him before. He'd never played for me, and the voice that was his father's voice for 18 years was all of a sudden his coach's voice. And there was a period of adjustment, especially for him. But I think as we figured that out and I had to give Doug some space because as much as I loved my father, I wouldn't have wanted to see him every day in college. So I had to let Doug kind of, enjoy college life as well and make sure I didn't talk basketball every second I was around him and let him, enjoy our family as well. So it was absolutely incredible. And this year, knowing that, it was his last year, obviously there were some terrific memories that we'll hold forever.
Coach, what was that process like for him coming out of high school and then obviously deciding to play with you? I mean, what was that like in terms of the advice that you gave him?
Well, Doug had signed with Northern Iowa out of high school. I was the head coach at Iowa State at the time, and Doug was playing with our guys at Iowa State and felt probably at that point in his career that playing in the Big 12 with Doug's body type at that point in his career was going to be a difficult thing to do. So he signed with Northern Iowa, and I took the job here at the end of March. And being in the same league as Northern Iowa at that point in time, Doug, obviously wanted to play for me if it was going to be in the same conference. So, I let him develop a love for the game on his own. I didn't want him to love the game because I wanted him to. I wanted him to appreciate and have passion for the game of basketball because it's what he wanted to do. And, he spends a tremendous amount of time in the gym working on his game, and he loves the game of basketball.
You talked about his body right there, Coach, and there are some concerns at the next level. How do you see him translating to the next level? And are there players that you really see him sort of like his game is mirrored after? I know we've heard Wally Zerbiak, we've heard, Kyle Korver, but how does he become those players and avoid sort of the pitfalls that have happened to Adam Morrison or even, Jimmer Fredette, a pure shooter in college, but just he struggles to get his shot off at the pro game?
Well, Doug scores in so many different ways, and I think that's maybe what makes him different than the guys you've mentioned, at least as college players. Obviously, Jimmer had the ball in his hands all the time, and we had to be very creative in getting Doug the basketball on the move in different places so that he could have an opportunity to be successful. But he shoots it easy from the three-point line at the NBA level, and can do it off screens and on the move, and he's very creative when he gets in the lane with both hands and being able to score at a high level, really in a lot of different ways. And I think the move to the Big East this year for us was a good move for Doug to play against bigger, longer athletes, and he had the best year of his college career. So, a lot of people have asked me what position he is. I'm not sure what position he is. He's a basketball player. If you put him on the floor and you put him in space, he's going to be very difficult to guard, and he's got a high enough basketball IQ that he'll figure out the rest of it. He'll be in the right spot defensively. He understands angles and everything that goes with that. So the guy is, he's a proven scorer, and I think he'll be a good scorer at the NBA as well.
You mentioned there that he is able to score in a lot of different ways, which it's what separates him from Jimmer. Jimmer was an on-ball shooter. He's a guy who's used to having the ball in his hand. But Doug ranked way up high in the catch and shoot, off screens, off the dribble. He's able to get his shot off from long range in so many different ways. Was that something that you guys specifically worked on to make sure that he would develop more of an all-around ability with his long shot?
Well, we've added things to Doug's game really every year, and even going back, Doug shot over 50% from the three-point line as a junior and a senior in high school. And then you combine that with 4 years of college where he's essentially been between 45 and 50% every year. He's gone, that's 6 years of data to go from shooting the three-point shot. So I think what you see is what you get with his ability to shoot the basketball. But his freshman and sophomore year, he scored on the block, and he scored shooting threes right on the three-point line. His junior and senior year, he scored on the move much more. He developed an intermediate game, both off the dribble and with some fadeaways to create some separation to get his shot off. So he just continued to add things to his game so he could score in different ways. Because obviously, he was a three-time All-American, so every defense was designed to try to stop him this year, and the reality of it is nobody really could. So, I think he's added enough to his game that he'll take what the defense gives him and find a way to score.
Hey, Coach, there have been, some criticisms about, Doug's athleticism and how that may translate to the next level. Is he a little bit more athletic than maybe people give him credit for?
I think he showed that in the combine. I think his vertical jump was 15th of the 60 guys there, and some of his shuttle times were near the top as well. So I think he probably surprised some people that he's a little bit better athlete than maybe people give him credit for. And, there's been a lot of questions about his defense. The reality of it is we couldn't have him in foul trouble. And, I was not going to allow him to take a lot of chances defensively because we needed him on the floor because he was that important to what we were doing on the other end of the floor. But, Doug's a cerebral player. He gets it. He understands how to play. And I think when people, get him in and have him in workouts, I think they'll be pleasantly surprised that he's a little better athlete than what they thought.
We're talking to Coach Greg McDermott of Creighton University here on the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast. Your response there to the lighter part of your response there to my last question kind of helps me transition into this next one. Were there some things that you knew Doug could do that maybe could translate well to the pro level, but perhaps he just wasn't able to showcase that at Creighton because you didn't necessarily need him to do those things at Creighton?
Well, we played him in and out a lot, and at the college level, the ability for us to post Doug and get him to the free throw line because of his ability to be creative down there. I'm not sure that translates as well to the NBA level, but you give him the ball at 15 feet and let him face up and go to work, which you see, every night you watch a playoff game. It's a big part of what happens. Doug's very efficient in that role. But he didn't have to handle the ball a ton for us. He was a willing passer, although I didn't want him to pass it a bunch. So I think people will see he's a better ball handler and a better passer than he probably showed in college just because we didn't put him in that many situations where he had to do things off the dribble.
What type of system do you think best suits his talents?
Well, we played very fast during the 4 years that he's been at Creighton. We were always on the attack in transition, and Doug's great at running to the rim and being the first one down there. He's great in the trail situation, shooting that trail shot. So I think in an open offense, and with a guard that can get into the paint and create a lot and create situations where Doug's going to have a lot of catch and shoot opportunities at the 3-point line. I'm not sure there's a better guy in the draft, night in, night out, that'll knock down threes the way he can.
Coach, during this process, have you kind of just shifted back more into being, more of a parent than a coach? I mean, do you kind of just let him do his thing now, or are you still kind of giving him input, or is he still looking for your feedback while he prepares for the draft?
I think when it's, some of the Player of the Year banquets that we were able to attend across the country, that allowed me to be a dad and just enjoy the career that Doug had and celebrate that with him. He's been in Chicago really the last 5 or 6 weeks with his agent working out, and now he's getting to the point where he'll go do a few workouts over the course of the next couple of weeks. But he still bounces some things off me, as does his agent. But he's graduated from college. It's his life now, and he's going to have to make some decisions on his own. But obviously, our family's very close, so we're still heavily involved.
Coach, we don't want to keep you all day, but I do know that following the final loss to Baylor, you gave a post-game speech that I think it's pretty much gone viral on the internet. How difficult was that for you to stand there as both a coach and a dad, knowing that that's the last time you're going to get to coach your son, most likely at any level going forward? But how difficult was that to stand up there and sort of address not just him, but the other seniors and your other players, but specifically Doug?
Well, it was very difficult, obviously. I had to take a couple breaks in the middle of that to try to get myself together. But those 4 young men have meant a great deal to our program. And, those Grant and Ethan and Jahans that came in with Doug, they've become like brothers to him. So to see the disappointment in their face that had come to an end, my job as their coach was try to get that shifted as quickly as we possibly could, to understanding the magnitude of what they've accomplished during their 4-year career here, and what we've been able to build on our campus. And the move to the Big East would have never happened without their input in really elevating our program to a place that it's never been before. So it was difficult, but as I've told Doug, it's the positives far outweighed any of the negatives. It was a time of our life for us to be able to share this 4 years together.
Hey, Coach, really appreciate you coming on and taking the time with us here on the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast. It's been great conversation.
Anytime, guys. Thank you.
All right, well, welcome back to the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast. Greg McDermott. Wow, John, it seems like every year we bring in a small school coach, and they just bring the noise. They lay down just a spectacular interview. Again, we've seen it with Coach Ray. We've seen it with Coach Rose. It never ceases to amaze me how these guys, these small school guys, give us the time, number one, but also how they really lay out a player and tell you exactly what a player is like on and off the court. And this is even a special case where we have a guy who is not only a head coach, but also the father of the prospect. Really interesting conversation, John.
Yeah, very unique situation. A very unique situation. This is a little bit different, as you mentioned, because he is Doug McDermott's dad. So he has a very unique perspective on the player that we are talking about. But we'll see. I mean, the Kings have not they've not scheduled, at least at this point. We don't know if they have anything upcoming. I would assume that they do in the next week or so, with Doug McDermott coming through Sacramento. They don't have anything thus far. They do have a workout on Saturday with Rodney Hood of Duke headlining that workout. So we've seen a couple guys come in.
I think we'll see McDermott, though.
I think we are.
He's intriguing. He's at least intriguing for the Kings. He fits a major need, but you're really not sure how he translates. And, we went through this with Jimmer.
He's not Jimmer Fredette, though. I mean, that's like the easy comparison. I think it's a lazy comparison to say, well, we had Jimmer. Well, what, just because both guys are white and they shoot threes? That's a terrible comparison. One guy is 5 inches, 6 inches taller than the other. So and the other guy was a tweener. I mean, obviously Doug McDermott is capable with the way the NBA is changing these days, potentially playing a little stretch four, and also playing the three. It's just a question of whether or not he can defend those positions.
Yeah, John, I would say that the one issue that I have with him that really makes me think of Jimmer Fredette is that neither one of them have a natural position, and that's always going to be an issue. I mean, literally, he does not have a natural position, and it's what we've seen with Jimmer for the last couple of years.
But I think it's worse for a guard, an undersized shooting guard, than it is for, a 6'8", a 6'8" forward who can play both positions. Because again,
you think it's worse for a guy who has to guard the best athletes in the world?
I think it's.
I'm not sure.
I think it's worse because forwards, they're able to switch back and forth in between both positions at this point. I think you do. The NBA has changed to where you do have more guys shooting the three from the 4 spot. I would be more concerned a couple years ago, or maybe even like 10 years ago, in regards to Doug McDermott's potential, but I think the game has changed to where he can fit in at either position.
Well, he's got to fit in the way that Kyle Korver fits in, the way that Wally Szczerbiak used to fit in. Again, we compare him to other white players, and I know that's unfair, but realistically, there's not a lot of players that you can compare him to. I mean, I guess, the guy that he really compares to is Adam Morrison, another great college scorer, and you just have to look at it and say, how does he work at the next level? And I'm not saying that Doug McDermott is going to be a complete bust. The guy can shoot. There's always going to be a spot for him in the league, but he's going to need to separate himself from a guy like Jason Capono. I mean, really, that's where he's really going to have to separate himself.
Yes, indeed. All right, let's change topics. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about another draft prospect. Julius Randle making some headlines on Thursday. Adrian Wojnarowski reporting of Yahoo Sports that the Kentucky forward will likely need surgery following the draft and may miss Summer League and will be out, I think, until September or October, something like that. And the funny thing is Julius Randle refuted Woj's report on Twitter, going public. Yeah, I believe his mother also spoke to the Lexington Courier-Journal out there in Kentucky, saying that the report was false. But in addition to Woj, you have Jeff Goodman of ESPN.com reporting also that he's hearing the same exact thing. And this is interesting because, as we mentioned, there's a lot that can change in between early June or even dating back to the combine or dating back to the draft lottery all the way up until draft night. And these are one of those fluid situations that we're seeing develop right now with Julius Randle potentially sliding. And I'm curious, I mean, right now, what is he? He's probably a top 7, potentially top 5 pick. If he does fall to the Kings, if he's still there, would you take him?
Well, I think the pick becomes very valuable because I think Julius Randle is going to be an extremely good professional. And I think that all experts believe that he is going to be he's Zach Randolph with handles.
Although I do find it interesting that this news breaks days before he works out for the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, it is interesting how the Celtics tend to jump in the fray on these things, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't know whether they want to trade down to 10 and draft him. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities here that he's going to be looking at. And I feel bad for the kid because he's very young, he's very frustrated, and all of a sudden his draft stock just got absolutely pummeled.
Yeah, it did. It's unfortunate, but I think he's still working out for teams. He's not resting, he's not sitting out. He's still going and traveling, working out for teams. As I mentioned, I believe he has a workout with the Boston Celtics on Friday. Not sure if he'll have a workout with the Sacramento Kings. It's possible. I mean, Marcus Smart right now, from according to some mock drafts, they have him going as high as potentially 4 or 5 to either the Orlando Magic or the Utah Jazz. So it's possible that we could see Julius Randle, especially now considering this may hurt his draft stock. We might see him come through Sacramento to perhaps I don't know, salvage. I don't know if that's the right or appropriate term here, to salvage his stock here going into the draft.
I think that's what you have to do. I mean, if I'm Julius Randle, I go to every single city that wants to have me, and I work out, and I snap a picture, and I tag Jeff Goodman and Adrian Wojnarowski in every single tweet. I mean, at this point, what do you have to lose? I mean, what he has to lose is millions and millions of dollars, and this is a really tough blow for a draft prospect. I mean, maybe he is injured, but I mean, Joel Embiid is going to go number 1 overall, it looks like, and that guy won't show his medical reports to anybody, and he's got a back issue. And if I'm NBA teams, I'm much more worried about a back issue with a 7'1" player than I am a short-term issue with a foot with a 6'9" player. And again, I really like how Randle translates to the NBA. He is going to be a good NBA player. I wish he had a little bit more Elton Brand in him than he did like Zach Randolph. And I think that would make him extremely valuable to the Sacramento Kings in particular, because the difference between those two players, while they're built very similar and they have a very similar style of game, the fact is that Elton Brand is a guy who can block 2 shots a game, even at advanced age and massive injuries. Elton Brand is still a guy who gets over a block a game, and that's something that Randall and Zach Randolph have never been able to do. So I'm intrigued by him. I mean, if he's there at 8, it's another situation where the Kings could really, really reap the benefits of a player that's well above his lottery spot falling to them. And, the Kings did this, 1998, 97, when they drafted Corliss Williamson, who had a back injury and actually had to undergo.
95?
Was it that early?
I think it was.
Maybe it was. Okay, well, he sat out the first year, right? The first half of the first year with back surgery. And they knew that there could be some potential for back injuries. And then when they actually drafted him, it was like, hey, it's going to happen. He's going to have to go in for back surgery. And, it's a risk, but he's a pretty high reward player. He's a really, really talented player. He can score in the post. I don't know that he's a perfect fit next to Cousins, but, do you give up a guy who can literally come in and do 18 and 9, maybe in a second season at the power forward position? That sounds pretty appealing to me.
Would he be able to get 18 and 9 playing next to DeMarcus Cousins, though? Would there be enough touches?
Well, he's a guy who has a lot of ability. I don't know. I mean, you're gonna see this team change a lot. I mean, that kind of reminds me, kind of brings us to another topic we're going to talk about tonight. Is it like watching the San Antonio Spurs just absolutely wallop the Miami Heat again and again in the finals? I hope the Sacramento Kings are watching, because you can fit a guy like Julius Randle into your system if you're willing to do so. And the Spurs are showing a willingness to allow anyone who has the cojones to step up and hit a big shot. They're going to get an opportunity. The ball is moving so freely. Everyone is passing. You can only limit the Kings by how they're going to take on the next season, how they're going to take to Mike Malone's coaching, how they're going to buy into their teammates. Because, again, the Sacramento Kings are the most selfish team in the NBA. They've proven it time and time again, and if they want to see like a recipe for success, they should be watching the Spurs. They should all be huddled up together somewhere. Maybe all of them fly to India with Isaiah Thomas and watch this playoff series and see how a team of superstars is getting their behinds handed to them by a team of no-namers who move the ball and play for each other and live for each other in this series. And so John, I don't think it really matters who the Kings take at number 8. It all depends on how their personality is coming into the season and whether or not they buy into each other and buy into Coach Malone.
I think you covered the Spurs and Heat enough for our podcast. I don't think we need to go that much in depth there. I mean, you pretty much said everything that
It's
can be
incredible to
said
watch,
about
though,
this
isn't it?
about this series. Yeah, it's just you've come to know this about the San Antonio Spurs. It's I will never forget during the lockout shortened season, they were playing the Kings in Sacramento on the back end of a back-to-back. They sat out Tim Duncan.
Yeah.
They sat out Tony Parker. They sat out Manu Ginobili, and they still blew out the Kings by 20 points. It was a rout. They were playing all the reserves, yet they just executed like a machine, and it was something that I had never, you never see that. You rarely see that in the NBA, and they're the one team that can do it because they all buy in. They all buy into the system because they know that if they play together, it results in wins, and that's the biggest task that a coach has in front of him, is to sell his system and to get players to buy into the system. And show that it can bring results, because sometimes players, they buy in early and then they don't see the results that they want to see, and then it quickly turns. That's the result of a bad team. You saw it here in Sacramento with some of the Keith Smart teams, Paul Westphal teams. Just even over the last 8 years, I shouldn't single out just those head coaches. We should point out to all Eric Musselman, Reggie Theus, all of those guys. I don't want to just put Keith and Paul on the spot there. There was just nothing.
And for that matter, Michael Malone had the same exact issue. It's not like it got better. I mean, this was a 28-win team with a whole heck of a lot more talent than they had the previous 4 seasons. And, I'll give them a pass because of all the change and the trades and the movement. But at the end of the day, you still had the same exact personality. The personality is what it is. It's a selfish team. They're playing for it themselves, and they're not playing for each other. And, again, it's the Heat have shown their ability to play, for each other, but nothing like what we're seeing. I mean, this is just a clinic. It's a clinic, and it's a really fun thing to watch for me, because it's basketball at its finest. It's what you hope to see when you go out.
Yeah.
Win or lose, you're going to be in a game that is fundamentally correct. It's something that makes sense when you're watching it, where a lot of the Kings games just don't make sense. I mean, there's so many. I mean, you can circle 8 to 10 plays in a game that you just shake your head and say, I can't believe I just saw that happen. Every game there's at least 8 to 10 plays, and that's something that you have to, get past and move forward. So,
well, the Heat at the same time, I don't think it's so much, hey, look, they're trampling a bunch of, haphazardly put together superstars. They are the defending champions. They just don't have a supporting cast. Their supporting cast is old. They need to retool. It's obvious. They need to get better role players around Wade, James, and Bosch. And if they get Carmelo Anthony, that would be funny. That would be interesting. That would be entertaining. But they still would need more than just Carmelo Anthony to win another championship in the NBA. But that's besides the point.
Couldn't agree more.
Let's move on to something else. Some other topics here of the day here on the Cowbell Kingdom podcast. Rudy Gay coming back, returning to town to a Heroes fanfare. I feel like the Kings, for whatever reason now, they use the relationship, the political relationships with the state government now to sell players or sell folks on their vision and their franchise, and they did it again. They had Rudy Gay paid a visit to the state capitol and met with Senate Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg and also Jerry Brown. Those guys spent some time with Shaq, I believe, when he bought into the team last year. But again, Rudy Gay back in town. Kings pitching to I find this interesting. Pitching him on opting in, not opting out and re-signing another long-term deal, but they want him to opt in to the $19 million next year specifically.
I don't buy that. Honestly, John, I just they want him to stay, like stay, period.
Of
Stay,
course, I
please.
think they want him to stay, but I find that detail interesting from Mark Spears, who was the one who to break the news that Rudy was coming to town. I find it interesting that it was that specific, that they want him to stay. I'm sure, obviously, they want him to stay. If it means signing him to a long-term deal, if he opts out, that's fine. But specifically that they want him to opt in for the final year of his contract is a fascinating subject to me.
I think that they've probably given him a menu of options. I think that they had like a portfolio of options that they will offer him. They will offer him, if he opts in, a 3-year extension at X amount of dollars. If he decides to opt out, they will offer him a 4 or a 5-year deal at, between 12 and 14 million a year. Some folks will go, oh my gosh, it's like, well, that's what Rudy Gay is worth. I think that it's interesting that they're harping on this please opt in thing. To me, that doesn't make any sense at all if you're the Sacramento Kings, because if you're going to chase a player like Kevin Love, or let's just say another player besides Kevin Love that is also on a 1-year deal, if you walk into next offseason with the potential to lose Rudy Gay and player X and have nothing but DeMarcus Cousins to walk into your new arena with the year after, that's just crazy talk to me.
I feel like they're banking, though, on if you bring Rudy Gay back and you bring Kevin Love here to Sacramento, team him with DeMarcus Cousins, even though they're on the last year of their deals, they're banking on a significant improvement next year. And there will be a lot of pressure, I think, on Michael Malone to get this team to be a playoff team in year 2 of his head coaching career. And if they do get to the playoffs, I don't really – I mean, that's very speculative right now. First and foremost, they got to get Rudy Gay back in the black and purple to begin with. But if they were to get to the playoffs, I think it would just be a very difficult scenario to imagine both Rudy Gay and Kevin Love not re-signing here.
All right, John. That if you were to make the move – and to keep Rudy Gay for 1 season and to bring in a Kevin Love, which a Kevin Love is going to cost you the number 8 pick. It's going to cost you Ben McLemore. And if you somehow make the playoffs or even get close to the playoffs, it's going to cost you next year's first-round draft pick for the J.J. Hickson trade with Omri Caspi a couple years ago. Again, that pick is only top 10 protected. You're talking about the largest gamble that we've ever seen a team make. Because you would walk into next summer with Rudy Gay, free agent, Kevin Love, free agent, no Ben McLemore, no top 8 pick, no first-round pick next year, and it could be an absolute disaster. At the end of next summer, they literally could have DeMarcus Cousins and nothing else. And I don't think that – I mean, that to me, that is the ultimate gamble. I mean, you can certainly – try to balance out that deal, that opportunity by signing Rudy Gay to a long-term contract. But if not, the risk walking into next season, I mean, how would you possibly walk into a room and tell DeMarcus Cousins, we don't have any of those 3 first-round picks, the 2013 pick, which has been McLemore, the 14 pick, which is number 8, or the 15 pick, which is now owned by the Chicago Bulls. And we just lost Rudy Gay and Kevin Love. But hold on, we're going to try to find some pieces to go around you. And, oh, by the way, we open a stadium next season. So, I mean, how does that work out? I don't think it does work out. And honestly, I don't know that Pete D'Alessandro could survive that. How do you survive that? Going to your owner and saying...
I don't think Pete D'Alessandro and Michael Malone would survive that at all. They probably, I think, the following season if they... But that's a big if. I mean, again, I think if they were to... I think the pressure would be on... It would be on Michael Malone more so than Pete D'Alessandro to deliver, because he would have the players, he would have the pieces, the makings of a core that could lead this team back to the playoffs. And again, if they get back to now, if they win 47 games and don't make the playoff, that's to me is where it's really risky, because the West is very deep, and you had a team this year in the Phoenix Suns that won 47 games and they didn't make the playoffs. So this team could be really good next year, could scratch potentially 50 wins and not make the playoffs just because the West is so deep.
Well, John, even if they do make the playoffs, even if they win 52 games, there's no guarantee that those guys come back.
Yeah, well, no, I think the odds would be a lot greater, because they would have shown if this team wins 50 games and makes the playoffs and loses in the first round, you think Rudy Gay and Kevin Love are going to just say, that didn't work after 1 year of figuring it out? You think they're really going to leave?
I don't think it's going to be, that didn't work out. It's still going to come down to what is best for me and my family, because that's how NBA players act. NBA players choose where they want to live. They choose who they want to play with. And honestly, Kevin Love would not choose to play in Sacramento coming into this season. If he made the playoffs, maybe that is enough to sway him. But
that's why I think they're gambling on this right now. Is they're gambling on the idea of bringing these guys together and potentially making a run at the playoffs, and that being enough to sway both Gay and Love to sign here long term. And it's a huge gamble, it's a huge risk, but at the same time, remember, you got to stop looking at the Sacramento Kings as just the Sacramento Kings. We are talking about a team that is going to be the unofficial team of the second most populous country in the entire world. We're talking about a team that's not going to just be the Sacramento Kings. We're talking about a team that potentially in 10 years, 15 years is going to be the India Kings. And that is something that I think is going to appeal to a player like Kevin Love, like Rudy Gay. I honestly, everybody makes a big deal about market size. I don't buy that as much. It's great to live in those cities, but at the same time, you can, if you're smart, you look at a player like Kevin Durant. He's still a global icon, and he plays in the 40th or 45th largest TV market in the country in Oklahoma City. And it's possible that he leaves Oklahoma City, but I don't think he would leave Oklahoma City just because he wants to move on to a bigger market. I think he would leave to play in a city that gives him a better opportunity to win. And I think with the way the world is structured these days, with everything being digital and you're connected at the snap of your finger to anybody, the market size to me is overrated. And again, that's why I think the Sacramento Kings are willing to gamble on potentially making the playoffs next year, and that being enough of a selling point to Kevin Love to re-sign here long term. But again, it's such a hypothetical situation. We're talking about something that may not even happen, because now you're starting to see some other teams enter the fray and say, you know what, we'll trade for Kevin Love without any assurance that he signs here long term. I believe the Phoenix Suns are willing to do that, and they're willing to throw in a little bit more. They could throw in Goran Dragic, who just made all NBA third team, I believe, and should have been an all-star this year. And they have the number 14 pick. They have the number 5 pick from last year's draft, and Alex Len to throw out there. So there are teams out there who are now willing to up the ante now that they've seen the Kings raise their bets as well.
Yeah, I think that there are going to be teams that are calling. And the other thing I'll tell you, too, is that you and I both know that when you hear these potential offers for Kevin Love, that very few of them are the true offer. It's really not what teams are offering. Are the Phoenix Suns offering up Goran Dragic? I don't think so. It's possible. But again, Alex Len is not even close to the prospect that Ben McLemore is, in my opinion, at this point. And you can keep throwing pieces in there if you're Phoenix. But again, I think a lot of this is like it's Love's agent, it's Minnesota Timberwolves trying to drum up as much interest as possible in their client, in their asset, to try to trade him for the biggest thing possible. And I just don't buy it. I don't, the Kings have been honest that they're willing to go the number 8 and then some other pieces. And we don't know that they'd even offer up Ben McLemore. We're not sure on that because that's just conjecture. It's what people are putting out there. And so I think what we have to look at is literally how does it fit? How does it work? I think Love would be a perfect fit in Sacramento next to DeMarcus Cousins, although he doesn't block shots, and that's going to be an issue. The Kings wouldn't play any defense at all. It would just be
you would find a way. I think going back to our conversation with Michael Malone, I found it interesting that he said, "Look, it's great to have a shot blocker, but it's necessary to have that when you don't have a good first line of defense in your backcourt." And I think if you bring in Kevin Love, you have DeMarcus Cousins. Obviously not the greatest defensive front line in the NBA there, but you try and address those issues of rim penetration by the opposing offenses by bringing in solid perimeter defenders, guys like Thabo Sefolosha type, a Tony Allen type, to help address that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You have to address other positions, and that's clear. There are going to be players available. We don't know how this roster is going to be remade. I know you threw out a tweet from our friend Matt Moore about possible Gerald Henderson for Jason Thompson.
That's a pretty
swap.
Good deal. If both teams wanted to do it, that's not anything that's reported. I just think that's something that makes sense and something that Matt believes makes sense for both teams.
Yeah, the Kings are going to need somebody who can really play defense, and it doesn't matter what position, honestly. They just need a defender. I mean, if they could trade Jason Thompson for Luke Baamute again, I think they would do that right now. I mean, if you can shore up any position, any of your rotational like 9 or 10 with a star defender, I think the Kings do it. And that's something that we're going to see. This is going to, again, it's not just like a possible Kevin Love summer. It's not a possible Rudy Gay summer or the number 8 pick. This is going to be a really, really involved summer that has so much to do with changing the entire dynamic of this team. And it's why, the Kings haven't really committed to Isaiah Thomas. And it's not because Isaiah Thomas doesn't play great defense. It's because Isaiah Thomas is 5'9". They think he gets passed over the top of a lot. They think that, they might be able to find a guy who's a more true, point guard for that position. That's what we're looking at, though. We're really looking at the transformation of a roster, and Pete has been, basically bringing in assets, storing assets, turning them over quickly sometimes. I think what we're going to see is a lot more of that. We're going to see him maybe not get the player he wants right now, but the player that gets him the player, or 2 players that get him the player down the road. And there's a lot to be looked at. There's a lot to, this is going to be a wild and crazy summer, which we just keep saying. But I mean, again,
every summer is like that.
But does Rudy Gay stay? Does he not stay? Do they make a trade with the number 8 pick? Do they not make a trade? I mean, again, I find it really interesting, like Chad Ford at ESPN put out there that, the Kings are looking at, possible, who was it, Brandon Knight or Schrader with the for the number 8 pick.
And that's something that's come up before with Scott Howard Cooper.
Yeah, I talked to Scott about that, and Scott was pretty clear. Like, look, I know the Kings were interested in the past with him, before the draft and everything else. They were very intrigued by him as a prospect. But, you look at the way that the Kings have handled their pre-draft, and you could say that the Kings are probably intrigued by Elfrid Payton. They're probably intrigued by Enos. And there will be other point guards that come through town that they will probably be intrigued with as well. They want somebody who's long, who's athletic, who can pass, even if it's not to supplant, Isaiah Thomas, but to complement. And, I think what they found with Ray McCallum is a guy that can play both the 1 and the 2. And they will probably look for more versatile players like that, guys that can give them more than just, a single position. And they can give them some length, some size, and some defensive ability. And so, will that come in the draft? Will they, do something low budget, like bring in a guy like Tony Douglas? I mean, there are a lot of options. There are just a ton of options for this team.
Okay, James, let's wrap things up here with a discussion of DeMarcus Cousins on Jimmy Kimmel Live. He made an appearance after Game 2 of the NBA Finals and got to take on Jimmy Kimmel in a little bit of one-on-one. And that was fun. I thought it was funny. It was funny to see him with the marching band drum on and have to beat it multiple times. Although I wonder what DeMarcus's reaction was when he heard Marv Albert say, DeMarcus Cousins, the leader in personal fouls and technical fouls in the NBA this year, and then to get teed up by Cousin Sal. I'm sure he knew it was all fun and games, but I bet you there was a little bit of DeMarcus that was irked that they had to bring that up.
Yeah, John, I love it. I mean, honestly, to me, this was a moment where DeMarcus Cousins just killed it. He hit a home run. I loved him boxing out Jimmy Kimmel with the big drum. I liked him smacking Jimmy Kimmel around. I liked his big smile. I liked the fact that he was able to take the ribbing and just go with it and have a good time. That is what people need to see of DeMarcus Cousins. He is so good on the court. He is an incredible athlete. He does things that big men should not be able to do, but he also, most of the game, looks like he's sucking on a lemon. He's a guy who does not look like he's enjoying himself at all. And we know that he can be funny. We know that he does enjoy himself, that some of his teammates enjoy what he does, that they have good times together. But the fact is, he doesn't allow anyone to see that. And we've been asking for that forever. And, we've even, I've compared him in the past to Rod Tidwell from Jerry Maguire. It's that extra little bit that he just doesn't want to give of himself. And I thought that this was a tremendous weekend. He let himself be seen in a different light. And I think it was a really cool moment. And I hope that he continues to do this. And, again, this is how he makes himself more marketable. It's how he makes himself an all-star. If people can actually connect with him and actually see that he is a person, it's one thing to do the whole thing in Sacramento where he goes out to Walmart and he dresses as Santa. That's nice, but that only gets seen by a finite amount of people. When you go and you do something on a national scale like this, it opens people's eyes to someone different, to something different about you. And it's great, John. This is it is a great moment for DeMarcus Cousins. I'm very happy he did it. I hope he does more of these things. I hope he lets people see more of himself like this. And I couldn't be happier for the guy because I think he realized that is what he has to. If he wants to be an Olympiad, he needs people to know who he is and not just be the guy who's got this many technicals and this many personal fouls and looks like, he's angry half the time.
Yeah, maybe in addition to getting a contract extension, a fat contract extension, it helps to have Relativity Media, Relativity Sports representing you when they've got connections to Hollywood. So
yeah, but to me, from what I know, there's always this option. There has always been the option for him to do things like Jimmy Kimmel, and he has never accepted the offer. And this is the first time that he actually said, yes, I will go do a media junket. I'll go do a couple of these things. And a lot of people are like, okay, all right, we buy it. Good. We're glad you're going to do it. Do it on your own. Don't do it with the Kings. Do it however you got to do it. Go ahead and do it. But he has had these opportunities in the past and not taking the offer up. And it's good to see him kind of recognize and jump in with 2 feet.
All right. On that note, let's wrap up this edition of the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast. We want to thank Coach Greg McDermott of Creighton for joining us on this week's episode, and join us next week for another interview and another edition of the show. Until then, I'm Jonathan Santiago for James Ham. You've been listening to the Cowbell Kingdom Podcast.